Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So, have we got a treat for you today? Jennifer, Dyan, Ghoston, welcome to the show. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, I am too, Simon. Thank you for having me. And I love when you say you've got a treat for everybody. I love when you say
Yeah,
this will be
it's a
fun.
treat. It's
Yeah,
always a treat.
it'll be meaningful, I believe, and quite enjoyable. So I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's try and make it very enjoyable. I don't know. So Jennifer has got a fantastic background on Zoom. So we're doing this on Zoom video, but you're only hearing the recording, so you can't enjoy this fantastic Caribbean, or I don't know, maybe it's Miami. There's palm trees, there's waves crashing. But Jennifer is at home in Nashville. she is not sat on a beach. She's not got a sunscreen or a hat on or anything like that. But it's taking me back because I've just come back from vacation, from holiday a week and a half or so ago. So it's taking me right back. So that's a treat for me. So Jennifer is she's an adoptee, fellow adoptee. She's a fellow podcaster, and we launched our podcast around the same time, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2 years or so. But you've also written a book. I've not written a book yet.
Not yet.
Not
So
yet. Someday I will do it, I guess. I've started it. I've got to 10,000, 12,000 words on about 3 or 4 occasions. But no, I haven't finished it yet. So Jennifer, how's it been? Because you've done how many episodes? Over 100, haven't you?
yeah, right around 111, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've left
Yeah.
me in the dust. You truly have left me in the dust. I do like one a week. Every Tuesday, one comes out.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're a retired police officer. I'm doing this full time, so I guess that's why I'm doing a little bit more. But I noticed the last episode that you just released with Jessica, Lucery. I always pronounce that one. There's lots of great guests that we've both had on, and lots of new names there too. So I just want to ask you what have you learned from those? What have you learned from those conversations with other adoptees?
So much, Simon. And speaking of Jessica, she and I'll use this word, unpacked. We unpacked the month of May together, which I hadn't really been able to put words to what that felt like. The whole idea of being born in that month, and then Mother's Day for me, like the next week or so. For her, I think sometimes she said it fell on her birthday. So like I learned so much from her regarding that. But overall, I think all of our journeys are different, and it is the differences, I think, that I learned so much from. I've learned so much from interracial, transracial adoptees, who can't go anywhere. I'm thinking of a Black adoptee adopted by white parents. They can't go anywhere without it being known that they're an adoptee, which is not my experience. I'm same race domestic adoptee. So I clearly fit in. I look like my adoptive family. So I've learned a lot from late discovery adoptees, that whole thing of being deceived, basically lied to. And I remember one late discovery told me that, as I did, got this information from my parents, particularly my mother, my adoptive mother, always tell the truth, right? And when she said that, I thought, yeah, our parents pretty much tell us that growing up, right? Always tell the truth. And here, late discovery adoptees, they didn't get that. They didn't get the truth from their parents. And I remember sitting with that, like, yeah, that's big. So, and I think it really challenges a person to be able to trust other people. Like your own parents are not telling you the truth, then I could go on, but I learned so much.
Yeah. My parents were very big on telling the truth as well, actually. I don't know whether all parents, I mean, they really pushed that home. Like, I don't remember, don't hit your sister was a big one. And which I didn't. I think I did once. I got into trouble, or I realized I was wrong. She didn't tell them something. Anyway, but tell the truth. That was, I'm struggling to figure out what else was, what are the key messages they told us, they told me and my sister. I think, as in told the messages, I think one of the things that they showed me was kind of hard work and business obsession or passion. And you know, there's that fine line between passion and obsession, you know. And that's what I saw from my mum and dad, and especially my dad, you know, looking to be the breadwinner and create
Same here.
Yeah.
Same,
That's what showed me. But he didn't tell me that, though. He just did it, you know. So he would go to work on Saturday mornings, and he would go after Sunday lunch, and before Sunday lunch, he'd be working in the dining room, working on ideas for his business. But in terms of what they told me, the honesty was big. And you know, you talk about that the late discovery adoptees and being deceived. So when I hear those stories, I have probably the similar kind of shock to them, because it goes against my beliefs, and it probably goes against how I was raised, and it does the same for you, right?
Sure, yeah. Fortunately, the social worker that handled my case was very specific with my parents. So I was told that, yeah, talk to her about her adoption, age appropriately. Don't act like it didn't happen. So I think for me, that was a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was talking to a fellow adoptee last week, and we came up with this idea of the layers of trauma. So different people have different layers. So the interracial layer would be a layer for the transracial adoptees. So it kind of builds up from on the bottom. So you might have the primal wound at the bottom, and then you might have another layer about if there's some neglect or abuse gone on in the birth, within the birth family, or after in the adoptive family. Then there's the kind of the transracial layer. Then there's the late discovery. So some of these, we all have different layers, and the layers have different thickness, seem to have different thicknesses. So one of the things I'm learning at the moment is, because my focus is on healing, not trauma. I've been, a couple of people have made me aware that I'm a little bit dismissive. I'm almost in too much of a rush to cover the trauma stuff in any conversation, because I want to get onto the healing stuff. And so I'm learning about having more empathy for the people with bigger primal wounds. So I talk about my own primal wound being like a paper cut, and some people feeling it like it's a shark biting a chunk out of their leg, right?
I think that's so possible that you could feel it as a paper cut and someone else feel it differently. And I think there are levels of sensitivity that differ among people. You know, I can think of people that I think are far more sensitive, meaning something lands maybe more difficult for them than it would me. And that's just the differences in people.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't think of myself as particularly sensitive. But I was talking to my mentor, the lady that started off my journey, my kind of exploration of identity, not from an adoption perspective, but more like a mentor, a counselor. I've been talking to her for like 14 years. And she says when she thinks of me, she thinks of one of the most sensitive guys that she knows, right? So I'm like, oh, so I don't see myself like that. How do you
Right.
see yourself? How do you see your own sensitivity?
I think I'm becoming more sensitive because I think it's a gift to be sensitive. Because I think you can be more empathetic and more compassionate more easily when you're a sensitive person. And so I've been staying curious to that, like about myself. But my career, for example, 27 years in law enforcement, yeah, it supported me not being a feeling kind of person or a sensitive kind of person, because there was a job that needed to be done where that typically can interfere, that sensitivity. And I've been accused of, being abrupt and things like that, which make me think, yeah, maybe I need to do some work in the sensitivity area. And I've been retired almost 9 years. So I've had time to kind of look at these things about myself, and in an attempt to live a holistic life, I want to get better at what aren't my strengths.
Yeah. Well, we're in the same camp there, right?
Yeah, I feel like you're very, outside of being humorous, you have a great sense of humor, by the way. I mean, I listened to probably 20 of your episodes and I'm laughing, I'm smiling at how you respond. But outside of that, I think you're transparent and you're authentic. Like these are your beliefs, this is how you feel, you own it. And I think that's important for us to live an authentic life. And I believe it was Dr. Gabor Mate that I heard say, if you have to choose between acceptance and authenticity, choose authenticity.
Yeah. Acceptance and authenticity. Yeah, there's some big themes there. Some big themes there. I think so. How does authenticity and honesty come together for you?
Hmm. I might have to answer that after I think about it a little longer. But
Yeah,
what's coming up for me right now is authenticity is being true to yourself. And I probably should pull out a dictionary, but I'm thinking honesty is if someone says, does this make me look fat? And you think it does, you say yes. But when I think of authenticity, if I know that would hurt their feelings because I know them, staying true to myself would not be saying, like being honest. Does that make sense?
yeah. I don't know the. Sometimes I ask a question and I kind of think I know the answer, and I'm just testing somebody else's waters, and I'm seeing can I be curious and get something new. But I truly hadn't got an answer to that. They seem very similar to me.
They
So
do.
I love the difference between internal and external. So it seems to me like the two sides of the same coin. One is internal, and in the internal face and the external face.
Okay.
And a big and the big thing for me is, you said true to yourself, right? So this kind of leads us on to the identity question.
Okay, good.
So what do you understand by self, or how do you see identity?
Well, first of all, I think I identify, and if I get off course here with your question, just bring me back. I identify with a lot of things. I identify with being a Black person, a female, a daughter, a mother. Like it goes on and on and on. An adoptee, of course. I think that's self-explanatory. So I identify with a lot of different things, but I would like to think I don't over-identify. So your question, how do I see identity? It's a lot.
Yeah. So you put that so eloquently, that there, your identity there, and it reminded me of, you know, a while ago when I was listening to the trailer for your podcast. So it's called Once Upon a Time in Adopteeland. Listeners, if you haven't already checked it out, chances are if you're listening to me and Jennifer, you've probably listened to her podcast already. But there's going to be links, obviously, in the show notes to Jennifer's website, Jennifer's book, Jennifer's podcast.
And I think thank you for
sort
that.
of, yeah, you put it on the trailer. You put it on the trailer about the how you identify. So
right, and I think I also say in the beginning of each episode, I believe part of my identity is being an adoptee, right?
Yeah. So I spoke to an adoptee yesterday, and she said that, I asking her, I was like, she's had a tough time, and I was asking her, you know, what's helped her, and she said, being a child of God. So is religion important to you too? Is religion important to you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I believe in God. I often use other terms to describe like this power that many people say is God. I like a lot of different terms. But yeah, I do. And I consider myself more spiritual than religious. You know, I was brought up in the Lutheran church, primarily in the Lutheran church, and I still consider myself a Christian. You know, if I have to, yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I am not, you know, I'm not in church every Sunday. I'm not opening my Bible every day. And I tend to lean into what I consider spiritual principles. You know, I years ago, back in the 90s, I started down that journey of learning more about spirituality. And it was just life-changing.
Yeah. So can I take you back? You said you use a number of different words for the power. I think that's what you said.
Creator, source, yeah, like it just depends on how I'm feeling. But I'm not turned off by any, like I'm not turned off by God, you know, and I feel like I can, yeah, I can, that's my choice to say, yeah, source is my protector, or my creator is my protector, or God is my protector.
So when you say that you're more spiritual than religious, what do you mean?
Well, I think religion what comes up for me when I think of religion and how I was brought up, it's like a lot of rituals. Yeah, mainly going, I was in church every Sunday. You know, we had chapel on Wednesdays. You know, it was just a lot of religion. Had to know Old Testament, New Testament. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And how does that help you in your life? How does being spiritual help you in your life?
That's a great question. I would say it helps me to be more compassionate and more accepting. And that's another thing about religion that I often would think about. Why are religions at odds with one another?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just wasn't quite clear to me,
Yeah.
the purpose of that.
So it sounds to me like you're going upstream. It sounds to me like spirituality is upstream of religion for you. So it's more. It's not about. It's not about the behaviors, or as in the rituals. It's not about the habits. It's not about the habits. It's not about the belief in one way. It's a bigger picture view than religion. So it's more unifying than it is, Protestant versus Catholic or Baptist versus Lutheran. It's more kind of upstream. It's bigger picture. That's how it sounds to me like you do. What you do.
I think that's one way to put it. In my mind, I see spirituality is downstream and
Ah,
religion upstream. Yeah. And the reason why I feel that way is because upstream feels like it's going against the current.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's more of a struggle going upstream than going downstream.
it definitely is. It definitely is in terms of a process. Yeah. Yeah. So the someone once said to me, started singing the I think this was Wayne Dyer was saying, row, row, row the boat. Row your own boat gently down the stream. Yeah,
Exactly.
gently down the stream. Merrily, merrily, life is but a dream. Whatever. Yeah. So he's talking about going with ease. When I say it, I'm thinking about closer to source. So I'm talking about more essential. And I'm not talking about a physical journey. I'm talking about, I guess, a more emotional, so personal journey. But when you use the word spiritual principles. So what are some of the spiritual principles that you've learned or come across that you hold on to or that you feel have value?
Again, compassion, um, kindness, um, awareness.
What do you mean by awareness?
Yeah. So I'm just fascinated by mindful awareness. And this kind of came, my study of it, I guess you could say, was last year during the time I was in professional therapy. So my therapist and I would explore this thing called anxiety that, you know, all people have from time to time, from one degree to another. And he wanted me to get to be aware of it because I don't even think I was aware of it. So as I started to like, oh yeah, I feel that anxiety coming, that dog is off leash. on the trail that I walk in the morning. And I don't know, am I safe, right? So that little anxiety would come up and I would just notice it, just be aware of it. And here's the thing that was a beautiful, I guess, you would say a epiphany.
Yeah.
Was this anxiety is not going to destroy me. Like, you can just be aware of it. And guess what? It goes away. But being aware of it in my body, I think empowered me versus not being aware of it.
Yeah. So you're talking about tuning into it or getting wise to it, or?
Exactly. And the more I became aware of it, it seemed like it started to lessen. Well, it didn't seem like it. It did. It started to lessen how long I held it. And even when it would come up again, it seemed like it was becoming less frequent.
Yeah.
And when I wasn't aware of it, I have to assume that it was happening more than I knew it was because I wasn't aware of it. Because when I started being aware of it, it seemed like it was happening all the time. And then I don't know if this is making sense, but I know awareness, and I guess that's with anything, just being totally present and aware is powerful for me.
So one of the words that I thought you were going to use in terms of other words for God is awareness. I thought you were going to say that, awareness or consciousness.
Really? No kidding.
So the metaphor for this that I love is the idea of is the screen. Okay, so we are awareness. We are the screen on which our life is unfolding. So one minute the screen is a horror story. Okay. The next minute it's a romantic comedy. The next minute it is a period drama. The next minute it's a cop show, right? Like NYPD Blue, which has just started again. So we've got all these different things going on the screen, and we're enthralled by the movie, and we lose sight of the screen. But we are awareness on which the drama of our life is unfolding, including the anxiety, right? Okay. So the anxiety. So I used to worry, and then I'd worry about worrying. Then I'd worry about worrying about worrying, right? And that you become what one of my mentors, a guy called Michael Neal, becomes I would become, right, a moron. I've got more on my mind.
Were you aware of it?
More on. Yeah. Yeah, I was aware of the worrying, and then I was trying to fight the worrying.
But I mean, were you aware of the worry on top of worry?
Yeah. But well, to a certain extent, not until he probably not until he drew my attention to it. Actually, yeah, I want to change my answer to that question. We never edit these podcast listeners, so I'm just going to change my answer. Right? Was I aware of it? Jennifer asked, was I aware of it? Probably not, Jennifer, until this guy drew my attention to it, and he explained with humor, right? More on our minds, right? So we've got but what happens is what we resist persists. So by worrying about my worrying, I am making worrying a bigger thing in my life, rather than noticing the train of thought and saying, I'm not going to get on that train of thought again. So you talked about being in professional therapy. How has that helped you? What's changed for you on the back of that? Is it the mindful awareness? Are there other things that have helped, and what's helped you through that? How's your life changed?
Well, it's definitely changed for the better. I was really with a great therapist who had me to just take a look at so many different areas of my life, particularly relationships with other people. And I'll give you an example. Going back to the trail, I walk the woods in the morning, pretty much every morning. I so enjoy it. And they have rules, all kinds of rules about how you're to conduct yourself on the trail. And one of the rules is that all dog walkers must have their dogs on a leash. So this one particular day, this guy gets out of his truck. I'm actually finishing up. I'm headed to my car in the parking lot. And he's getting out of his truck. His two dogs, just full of joy, come running towards me. And I'm a dog, like I said, I'm a dog person. I'm not afraid of dogs, but I don't know his dogs. And I don't know what they might do. They look to be playful. So they come charging at me, and I don't think they jumped on me, but they wanted to smell me, and they were not aggressive. I've been around dogs long enough to kind of tell the difference. And I remember this guy said, no, I say to him, I don't know your dogs. And he said, sounds like your problem, something like that. He got smart with me. And I remember actually feeling rage, like, first of all, you're breaking the rules and you're going to respond to me like that, all of that. And I remember telling my therapist about it. And I remember him saying, how important is that guy? Right? In the scheme of things. Because nothing happened. The dogs didn't hurt me. He and I didn't get in a fist fight or anything. He went his way, I went mine. And I remember just sitting with, how important is that guy? For me to still be thinking about it. The next time I talk to somebody, I got to tell them about this guy and his dog's off leash and so forth. And that's just one example of how we would take everyday situations and have me reframe them. And I tell you, that right there has been big in my life. How important is this? And you would think, after all these years of living, that I would know to do that. And I probably did know to do that, but therapy for me reminded me of what I already know.
Yeah. So, how important is adoption?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
You want to frame it a different way for me?
Sorry?
You want
to frame it a different way?
Maybe a little more specific.
Okay. So, how has therapy impacted your take on the importance of adoption in your life?
So, like, my adoption journey personally.
Yeah.
Because I was hearing it like kind of like my whole take on adoption, right? Which is
no, sorry, no. How important? How important? Yeah, sorry. Thank you for asking the question to give me a chance to reframe. Yeah.
You're fine. I think that as I sit with what it feels like to think about what happened to me, therapy has given me permission, I guess. I don't know if that's a good word, but we'll use it for now. I'll use it for now. It's given me permission to say, yeah, that 2-year-old that was in foster care then went to more strangers. Wonder what that feels like. Because I've been around 2-year-olds and they're quite perceptive. So therapy has given me space. I like that word better. It's given me space to say it's okay to think about how I feel about what happened to me. And I think sometimes, and I'm gonna go back to my podcast, most of the guests, if not all of the adoptees, I feel their genuine thankfulness for being given an opportunity to share what happened to them. Like just having that space. And I don't even think it's just necessarily validation. It's just like, it's important to somebody else. Like to hear my story, to hear what happened to me, to say, I'm sorry, even. I'm sorry that happened to you. It kind of reminds me too of the whole grieving process. People expect when you lose a loved one to have an opportunity to grieve and to feel not so good about it. For so long, and I'll speak for myself, I wasn't allowed to talk about my adoption growing up. It was like, kind of like, get over it. Life is good. We want the best for you. We love you. That happened to you. Move on, right? But I think it's more than reasonable to allow a person whatever time they need.
Yeah.
To just kind of sit with what happened to them.
Yeah.
Like I can't tell somebody, oh, you should be done grieving. It's been 3 years. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. And I don't think people are trying to be stuck. I really don't. I think they're just still trying to figure it out. And I wasn't the fastest learner. I was the one that had to read the chapter 2 or 3 times. And some of my classmates, they read it one time. Like my ex-husband had a photographic memory. He could read something. It was like he took a picture of it or something. It just stayed in his. I wasn't that kind of learner. So I wouldn't want to be beat up because I'm not learning at the rate someone else is, or not growing, or not coming out of grief, or whatever it is. I would like someone to say, I understand.
So going back to my kind of point, my point on the layers of trauma, there's that inconsistency, and the change thing. You're saying, and I didn't put that in when I was talking about the layers of trauma. So on top of the primal wound, there's that early disruption. So I was with my mum and dad from when I was like 5 weeks old. You had a longer period of and I was in short-term foster care for, I don't know, weeks before that, a few weeks before that. But you had that 2-year period, as you say, and the 2-year-old kids are pretty aware. So I didn't add that when I was talking about the layers of trauma. I didn't kind of mention that one, so I wanted to kind of honor that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Listening again, there was something else that you mentioned in the podcast about in the podcast trailer, and you've alluded it to again in terms of being given space by your adoptive mum. You asked some questions. What can you tell? You asked a question when you were 11 or 12.
Oh,
Yeah. Can you share that? You'll do. It's far better hearing it firsthand than me, mumbling over it.
Well, I wanted to know my other mother. Like, I was clear I have another mother. And I want to know, I want to know her name, and I want to know who she is. And my adoptive mom, and I believe in her protectiveness. She passed in 2002. So I don't have the opportunity to really like sit down and talk more about it, as an adult. But she was like, why would you want to do that? And I'm thinking, why wouldn't I want to know my other mother?
Being kind of misunderstood or questioned or grilled on something. It's really horrible, isn't it? It's really. I'm just remembering something that happened with my mum, and the reason it sticks out, it wasn't anything to do with adoption. It was actually I ran out in front of a car, and I got knocked down. The car was doing about 5 miles an hour, so I had a bruise. But when I got home, and she thought I was 10, I think, and I told her. She said, "Well, what did you do that for?" And I thought, well, I didn't do it on purpose. But like not being that. It's a big thing for me, actually. Not being understood.
Mm-hmm. I saw it as
sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's horrible.
Yeah, I thought my mother was being dismissive.
Yeah.
Very dismissive. And then I have to take into consideration that I believe her generation, the culture, like there are some factors that I can think of that would have her wanting to just keep it moving. Yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole. And then I was 12. 12 is different than being like 18 or an adult.
So it's one of those things where, being dismissed rather than treated with empathy, it grates, doesn't it? It grates on me a little bit. Like not being understood, frustration about not being. I sometimes feel frustrated about not being understood, and it's and that's why it's so empowering to have the space to talk about it. You talked about space earlier on.
And so many adoptees really they desire the opportunity. I'm thinking of us born in the 60s and, 70s and so forth, but just want to have an opportunity for space to be created for us.
Yeah. What about grace for our parents?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I believe in that.
I mentioned Wayne Dyer earlier on and Row the Boat. Do you remember Wayne Dyer? Do you remember him?
Oh, absolutely. He was an adoptee, right?
Yeah. Was he? I don't know.
No, he was separated from.
Separated from his dad. His dad walked out.
Yeah, and it seemed to me.
Ah, right. Maybe he was. Yeah.
I'm familiar with Dyer for
Yeah, yeah.
sure. In fact, that was one I read one of his books. That was one of the first books I read in what I would consider the spirituality realm. I'm trying to think of the title of it. It'll come to me. But I was like, this guy is on to something. But go ahead about
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer.
So I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast, but I truly believe it's a fantastic story. So have you heard the story about him going to his father's grave?
I have.
Yeah. So I just put it in briefly. Right. So his father abandoned Wayne and Wayne's siblings and Wayne's mum when he was little, and by a long circuitous chain of events, he ended up at the grave. And he went on the grave planning to pee on the grave, and he ranted at his dad, or at his dad's grave for 2 hours, shouted at him, and then he had a spontaneous forgiveness. So something happened within him. He was all cried out, and he had an epiphany moment of like not holding a grudge against his dad anymore. And this wasn't like an affirmation you do in the mirror. I must not hold my ground. It was a spontaneous forgiveness. And he reckons that was when that piece of letting go did him enormous good, like in every part of his life. And it always comes to mind, that story, and I do mention it a lot on the podcast, because it's like, first off, it was spontaneous. So it wasn't a planned mindset thing. I must change my mind about my dad. I must forgive him. It wasn't something that he planned to do, something that happened spontaneously, and how it freed him up. And you talked earlier on about being with Jessica and unpacking the month of May, right? So it's like unpacking. It's like removing the baggage that's keeping us down. It's like, when we're in a hot air balloon, they've got sandbags in the balloon to keep the and they've got ropes, and they're keeping the balloon down, but they throw the sandbags out, and then they untie the ropes, and then the balloon soars. Like, who doesn't want more of that? Eh?
I think that's one way for it to happen.
Sorry?
That's one way for it to happen, like the Wayne Dyer story. That's one way. I think unpacking something or letting go, maybe even piece by piece, is another way.
Yeah.
I think there are just so many ways that one can come to a better understanding, better truths.
Yeah.
Even epiphanies. There's not any one way, I don't think, for that to happen. And I'll give you an example. There have been guests that have said something, and I'll sit with it for days, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, I get it. Like, I get how that works. I understand now.
Yeah.
I would consider it an epiphany when it happened, even though it didn't happen spontaneously.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And one of the big things I've seen, or I'm seeing recently, is that I've been in love with the once and done dramatic epiphany moment, like the Wayne Dyer thing. Nothing is ever the same, right? It's the drama. It's the happy end. Cue the closing credits, and we're off. Yeah, like, that's it. It's great. It's done now, once and done. And it ain't like that.
Right.
Like that.
You know, I really appreciate Astrid Castro's episode with you. A lot that she said resonated with me. And one of the epiphanies I had is when you all talked about the sky and the clouds. And Astrid was like, you know, the clouds produce rain and we need rain. And I was thinking, yeah, like it all matters. It's not just about the sky. And then I started thinking about the shadow. You've heard the shadow, like that dark part of ourselves. And I've been learning to embrace my shadow. It's there. And that I don't have to fear it. And I don't have to try to like go away, go away. You know, I can just kind of be aware. I can be aware of it.
So when you're talking about the clouds, you mean the feelings, right?
Well, I probably need to listen to the episode again, but I remember feeling like, because I know you're big on metaphors, and I know you were using it as a metaphor. I just remember thinking, yeah, it could be feelings. It could be, I mean, it could be whatever, but I just remember thinking that in life, spiritual beings having this human experience, we're going to have things that aren't blue sky, all blue skies. You know, it's going to come, it's like an ebb and flow. It's going to come in and out. I mean, when the sun is out as it is today, it's beautiful out there, bright and sunny and all of that. But it's not going to be like that every day. And that my responsibility is to appreciate the sun out here just as much as I appreciate the clouds and the rainy days and the cold, like just have acceptance. If I can't enjoy it, because I usually stay in when it's raining and messy out there. If I can't enjoy the outdoor, I can still accept it. I can accept that this is the way it is today.
Yeah.
Yeah, just all of it. All of it is just a part of this physical experience, this human experience.
So that's the acceptance piece, right?
Exactly. And this Eckhart Tolle that I was studying some years ago that introduced me to the acceptance piece. Do you know Eckhart Tolle?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've read The Power of Now, and
yeah.
I find him really complicated.
Do you really?
Yeah.
It was funny, The Power of Now. I think I was halfway through it that I wanted to put the book down. And I just see something through typically. So I just kept reading. And it was right after the middle of the book that a light bulb came on for me. But A New Earth was really life-changing, because I think that there are things that we won't necessarily enjoy, but we can have a level of acceptance.
Yeah. The metaphor that I was going for, I think, was the fact, I talked about the screen and the movie. Yeah, the screen and the movie. So we're the screen. We're enthralled by the movie. We're lost. We're lost in the movie. A good movie takes us away from the truth. Takes us away from where we are, and we're invested in it. We're engaged in it. Yeah? So we're lost in the movie. And we lose sight of the screen. The screen is who we are. And a similar metaphor with the clouds, with the sky, and the clouds are the thoughts, our thoughts. And sometimes you've got wispy, nice, fluffy clouds. Sometimes you've got stormy clouds. And probably Astrid took it from the point, well, yeah, we need we need rain. We like if the sun's, you can't live in the desert without water.
Right.
You have to bring your water with you. So
Right.
it's too hot. It's in an inhospitable terrain place to be. So like there's and yet somehow, I'm talking about myself here, I have become, or I was, emotophobic, right? So I'm trying to push away the bad clouds, what I see as bad clouds. Yeah, bad clouds in inverted commas. Yeah, we're trying to, I'm worrying. So there's a cloud called worry, and I'm trying to push that cloud away rather than let it blow through.
Why?
Because I am afraid in that moment, I'm afraid by the negative emotion, because I've been told, because I've picked up on the idea that it's bad to feel bad, because we're all trying to feel good all the time, and people are trying to sell us stuff on the basis that this is going to make us feel good. And they're stirring up our pain and then saying this is the solution. So to motivate people, we're motivated either away from pain or towards pleasure. But the advertisers know that away from pain that we're feeling in the moment is far more pressing, and so they will stir up that pain, and so you see this, we have this in the UK. I don't know if you have it in the States or not. I think it was a travel company. They created this concept called Blue Monday. And Blue Monday is the third Monday in January. So you've got Christmas behind you. Your credit card statement have arrived, and you've still got another week to go till you get paid at the end of the month. And it's the saddest day of the moment. And so on this saddest day, you need a holiday to look forward to escape this thing. So that's what people do. They stir up the emotion. They make Blue Monday a thing, and then to sell us something. Yeah.
Have you ever had like a really good cry and felt so good afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I spent a week crying I spent a week, the lady that I was mentioning earlier on, that I started working with, her and her partner 14 years ago. We sat, 8 of us sat in a room together for 5 days, and for the first 2 or 3 days, we all cried. We took it in turns to cry. We shared our story, and how we'd felt through our stories, and we all felt better. We all felt better after that. And he's the guy that he came up with. I was explaining the balloon metaphor earlier on with the sandbags keeping us down. He came up with this fantastic line, that is encouragement does for people what helium does for balloons. So it makes us soar. And letting go, like for Wayne Dyer, what he did was letting go of his hatred towards his dad. That set him. The truth sets him free. The truth of who he is. The truth of who he is underneath his trauma, right? Underneath the trauma of being abandoned by his dad, and how he felt that. And that stayed with him.
I see that story as him letting go.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of power in letting go and being unattached, right? Yeah. I do find there's a great deal of power. And it goes back to identity and over-identification, so to speak, or over-identifying with any parts of ourselves can be harmful, I think. I know for me, to over-identify or to be attached suggests an unwillingness to let go.
Yeah.
You know, let go of any belief or thought that's not serving me. But that takes time, it takes work, it takes intention.
I think it takes intention. I think it may take time, but it always happens in an instant.
Always?
Yeah. Yeah. It always it's have you heard me talking about the bus stop for epiphany, hanging out at the bus stop for epiphanies? You heard me
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So you're hanging out at a bus stop, you're waiting for a bus. There's a timetable for the bus. There's no timetable for epiphanies. So you don't know how long they're going to take. So they might take an hour, they might take 4 weeks. If it was a bus, right, you'd be waiting for the bus for 4 weeks. But when it comes around the corner, it only ever takes 20 seconds to do that last 50 yards.
Mm.
It happens in an instant. You go from thinking one thing to the next thought. And that happens in an instant. But you don't know how long it's going to take before the thought changes.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
And the thought and the same thought can change a million times. It's not a once and done thing. It's not a once and done thing. You can see things, in my opinion, you can see things, in my experience, you can see things, you can have the same thought at a different level.
Mm-hmm. I think what I would add to that, which kind of goes back to something I said earlier, of being reminded, you know, during times in therapy, what I already knew.
Yeah.
Because I'm often saying to myself, remember what you know. Like, I'll just say that in my head, remember what you know. Meaning that there's so many things I've learned over the years that I know, but for whatever reason at a particular time, I'm not recalling it.
Yeah.
It's there. It's there. So that suggests to me that things can kind of come and go. You can have this epiphany and be moving right along nicely in life. And somewhere along the journey, you forget it, right? You forget what you know. And you have to be reminded. And that's why I think healing for me is a lifelong journey. Because unfortunately, I'm not able to recall these things all the time. All the epiphanies I've had, all the things that I've like, whoa, you know, that was life-changing. Like, there are times in my life where I don't recall that.
Yeah.
But as I continue to study, read, stay connected to the community, we'll say, the adoption community and fellowship, which is really important to me, fellowshipping with other adoptees, they help me. They help me to remember what I know. And yeah, so that's the key for me anyway, is to continue, you know, my study of spirituality. Like, I get excited. I'm reading a book now. Have you heard of this radical? Oh, you can't. Can you say that? Radical acceptance?
I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
I kept hearing people talk about this for like 2 years. I said, just get a hold of that book. Why don't you? So I'm reading it now, and it's so good. And she's really not telling me anything I don't know.
And the name is Tara Brach, Brach. I'll put it in the show notes, listeners, because I know that some of you may be driving or walking your dog, and you'll be trying to remember that. So yeah, I'll try that book. I hope it's on audio, but I might buy it on Kindle.
Yeah, well, I just borrowed it from the library, and Radical Acceptance, I'm maybe 70 pages in. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm reminded, because I've read so many books that approach spirituality from so many different ways, but basically it's going in the same direction. And so that's how I can recall. So back to the epiphany, you have one in that, what, 20 seconds you said? In that short moment.
It's a new thought, so it always arises in a minute.
Wow.
Not in a minute. It always arrives in a split second. If I go from an old thought to a new thought, I don't know when the new thought is going to go. So you use the word curious earlier on, right? So you've got to be intentional and have the space. Yes.
Yeah.
That is what I mean by hanging out at the bus stop for epiphanies. What I'm saying is a bus should be coming. There's a timetable, so it should, if it runs on the hour every hour, it's 6 o'clock. It should be that. There's no timetable for epiphanies, so that you might be waiting at that bus stop for an epiphany for 4 weeks. You may be waiting, but the last, when the bus comes around the corner, it's always going to take that the bus always takes 20 seconds to do that last 50 yards, right? So the time is, it happens in an instant, but you may have to wait for it. You may have to wait for that instant, that new thought to arrive. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And just one last thing. I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to say that another epiphany I had between the last time we talked, when you recorded for my podcast, and we got to talking about psychology. I think, how did we do that? Psychology and spirituality, something on those lines. And I remember thinking, I took on the challenge of spirituality first. Oh, I know what it was. It was the spirituality was something that I got a sense that, and I don't know when you started your journey with spirituality. I should start there. When did you start?
I would say 14 years ago. Okay.
See, that's what came up for me, because I started like 30 something years ago, right? Like picking up Wayne Dyer, and this adoption thing was on the shelf somewhere. Clearly, last thing I would have thought is I would be doing a podcast about adoption in 2021 and so forth.
Yeah.
I was just excited about learning everything about spirituality. And I feel like that journey just happens to be the one I was on, brought me to where I am now.
Yeah.
Really being present and intentional with a community that I feel like I belong to. I don't have to fit in. And it just feels right to be doing this at this time in my life. And I thought that's so interesting. Kind of our different approaches to this, because I know you want people to thrive. You want adoptees to thrive. You wouldn't have titled your podcast Thriving Adoptees if you were on some other mission, right? And I love that about your work. And I think you are so deeply passionate about adoptees being able to keep moving forward, I guess, keep being able to recognize their consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you would put it?
Yeah, I would put it trauma informed, hope obsessed, healing obsessed.
Healing obsessed.
And why is there hope? Because we are not our trauma.
Right.
We are not our trauma. It
Well,
just
I totally
it
agree.
just isn't. It isn't who we are.
Yeah, I agree that we are not our trauma. And the way we wrap things up, I thought quite nicely for your episode was to question everything. You know, to question everything. And I would add to that, for me anyway, stay curious. Do you know of Curious George?
All right.
So this is Curious Georgina. And I say, I know the listeners don't know, but it's a little like a teddy bear of a little
The
monkey.
monkey.
Yeah, it looks like Curious George. But I'm on a mission to stay curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Thank you very much, listeners, and thank you so much, Jennifer. That's been a gorgeous conversation.
Thank you, Simon. I'm delighted that you invited me, that you reached out to me last year. I had some challenges with technology, and it was not a problem. I think you're doing a really great job, and keep up the great work.
You too. You too. Thanks, listeners, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you. Bye.